I never considered myself the kind of person who believed in the supernatural. I grew up in a family where logic, science, and reason were valued above all else, where strange creaks in the night were explained away by pipes, shadows were blamed on faulty lighting, and ghost stories were just something you told around a campfire for a cheap thrill. Yet when I look back on the year that changed my life forever, when I think about the nights I spent awake with my heart pounding so hard I thought it might rip through my chest, when I remember the way reality itself began to bend and crack around me, I realize that nothing in the world could have prepared me for the terrifying series of events that would unfold inside the walls of the old boarding house I moved into. A place I chose simply because rent was cheap, because it was close to work, and because I thought the quiet solitude of the building would give me peace. But instead, it became the stage for a nightmare I could never have imagined. And the more I try to put it into words, the more I feel as though the shadows in the corners of my room are listening, waiting for me to finish so they can remind me that what I endured was not a dream, not a hallucination, but something that followed me, something that may never leave. It all started the day I signed the lease. A cold January afternoon, when the wind seemed to slice through my jacket as if I wasn't wearing anything at all. The landlord was a man in his late 60s, tall, thin, with a face that looked carved from stone and eyes so sunken and dark it was impossible to tell whether they were brown or black. He spoke in short clipped sentences as he showed me the building, almost as if he wanted to get it over with quickly, and I noticed how he avoided looking at certain corners of the hallways, how he would turn his body subtly, as if to block my view of some of the doors, and though I brushed it off at the time, I should have taken it as a sign, because every strange detail I ignored in those first days became a warning I wished I had listened to. The building itself was old, older than anything I had lived in before, built in the early 1900s, its hallways long and narrow, the wooden floors warped with age so that every step released a groan that echoed like a voice complaining in pain. The wallpaper was yellowed and peeling in jagged strips, like skin, and the air carried a faint dampness, the smell of dust mixed with something sour I couldn't quite place. But I told myself I could live with the flaws, because the rent was half what I'd pay anywhere else in the city, and the room I was given, room 4 on the second floor, seemed harmless enough at first. Small but functional, a single bed, a dresser with a cracked mirror, and a window that looked out over the alley where the streetlight flickered in and out like a dying heartbeat. And I remember thinking that night, as I unpacked my clothes and set up my few belongings, that maybe, just maybe, I'd finally found a place to start fresh after a year of bad luck, heartbreak, and financial struggles. I even laughed to myself when the old radiator hissed like a snake and clanged as if someone were striking it with a hammer, telling myself it was just part of the building's charm. But that laughter died quickly when lying in bed that first night. I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my door long after everyone else had gone quiet. Slow, deliberate steps that stopped directly in front of my room. And then nothing, no knock, no movement, just silence pressing against the thin wood of the door. I lay there frozen, clutching the blanket to my chest, straining to hear if maybe it was another tenant coming home late, but the seconds stretched. In 2 minutes, and I knew Sumiani or something was standing there, listening, waiting, and when I finally gathered the courage to whisper a shaky hello, the air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The radiator gave a violent hiss, and the footsteps slowly receded down the hallway until they faded into nothing, leaving me with a pounding heart and a mind racing to convince itself it had just been my imagination. But it wasn't, because the next morning, when I stepped into the hallway, I saw faint wet footprints leading away from my door, small and bare, as though someone had walked through water and then wandered the corridor in the middle of the night. And the strangest part was that they stopped halfway down the hall, disappearing abruptly, as if the person had simply vanished into the air. I tried to shrug it off, told myself maybe another tenant had come in from the rain, though the weather had been dry, and the floors should have soaked up any moisture. But as the days went on, the oddities only grew. Whispers I couldn't trace seemed to float down the hallway at night. Words I couldn't quite make out but which carried a tone of pleading, like someone begging for help just out of earshot. And objects in my room began to move ever so slightly when I wasn't looking. The dresser drawer sliding open a crack, the mirror tilting forward, my notebook lying in a different place than I'd left it. And though these details might sound small, they built inside me like a pressure cooker, because deep down I knew there was no logical explanation that fit. No one else had a key to my room, no one was sneaking inside, yet the disturbances persisted, and every night, without fail, the footsteps would return, stopping outside my door as if the unseen visitor was waiting for me to invite them in. And each night I would lie there, sweat soaking my shirt despite the chill, praying that the flimsy lock would be enough to keep whatever it was on the other side, until one night, after nearly 2 weeks of enduring the routine, something happened that I can never erase from my memory. Something that still wakes me in the middle of the night, gasping for air. Beckers. This time, the footsteps didn't stop at my door. This time they kept going, slow and heavy, and then I heard the unmistakable sound of them entering my room, even though the door never opened. And when I turned my head toward the dark corner by the dresser, I saw it, a shadow darker than the rest of the darkness, tall, hunched, its edges blurred, as though it wasn't fully formed, but its presence was suffocating, a weight that pressed against my chest so I couldn't scream, couldn't move, and though it had no eyes, I felt it looking at me, studying me, and in that moment every rational belief I had ever held shattered, because I knew I was face to face with something I could not explain, something that should not exist. And as I lay there paralyzed, the thing began to drift toward me, its form rippling like smoke, the sound of whispers filling the room from every direction, voices overlapping in anguish. And then, just when I thought it would reach me, just when I thought I would die of terror, the radiator gave another violent hiss. The light from the street lamp outside flickered bright for a split second, and the figure dissolved, vanishing into the air as if it had never been there, leaving me trembling, sobbing, and unable to convince myself that I had only imagined it, because the smell it left behind lingered for hours, a sour, rotting stench that clung to my skin and sheets. And from that night forward, I knew my stay in that boarding house would never be ordinary, because something had chosen me, and it was only just beginning. From that night on, sleep became a stranger to me. Every time I closed my eyes, I could feel that presence hovering in the darkness, waiting, and though I tried to tell myself it was stress, exhaustion, or even some bizarre waking dream, deep down I knew the truth. Something in that house had noticed me, chosen me, and the more I tried to ignore it, the stronger it became, the more it made itself known. And soon, even the daytime offered no refuge, because shadows in the corners seemed to stretch unnaturally long. Voices whispered faintly from the pipes, and objects no longer just shifted. They flew. I'd come home from work to find my chair overturned, the mirror on the dresser shattered, or my books piled in the center of the floor in strange, deliberate shapes, circles, triangles, symbols I didn't recognize. And with each passing day, I felt my sanity fraying, because I was living in a place where reality bent itself to the will of something unseen, something that wanted me broken, afraid, and alone. But the worst part was how it escalated in ways that were almost intimate, as though it were studying me, learning me, toying with me, and I began to feel like a lab rat in an experiment designed by something cruel beyond human understanding. I would hear my own name whispered in my ear when no one was around, smell that same rotting stench the moment I felt calm, and see fleeting glimpses of that tall, hunched shadow in my peripheral vision, no matter where I was, until I dreaded even looking into mirrors, because sometimes, for just a second, I would see it standing behind me, its form so close that I thought I would feel its cold breath on my neck. But every time I turned around, the room would be empty. The silence, deafening, and I began to understand that it wasn't just haunting the building, it was haunting me, attaching itself like a parasite I couldn't shake off. And though part of me wanted to flee, to pack up and run as far as I could, another part of me was terrified that if I left, it would follow, that whatever rules governed this thing were not confined to 4 crumbling walls. And that thought alone routed me to that room, because at least inside I could pretend the boundaries of the house contained it. Though I knew I was lying to myself, because one night I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. The screen lit with an incoming call, and when I looked, I frozeth. Number on the screen was my own, as if I were calling myself, and against every instinct screaming inside me, I answered, and what I heard will never leave me, because it wasn't static, it wasn't a prank, it was my own voice, trembling, crying, whispering, "Please, get out. You have to get out before it's too late." And then a scream, raw, guttural, animalistic, before the line went dead and my phone shut off completely. Though the battery had been nearly full, and I sat there in bed, clutching it with shaking hands, my reflection in the darkened screen distorted as if another face were overlapping mine. And for the first time I truly believed I would not make it out alive, that whatever had marked me was only just beginning its torment. And sure enough, the following days blurred into a waking nightmare. I stopped going to work, unable to function after nights spent wide-eyed and paralyzed with fear. The landlord avoided me, his eyes flicking nervously toward my door but never meeting mine, and the other tenants, few as they were, seemed to vanish from the hallways altogether, as if the building had emptied itself of life except for me and the thing that owned me, until I felt like I was the only living soul left, trapped in a maze of peeling wallpaper and whispers that grew louder each day, sometimes forming words I could finally understand, things like "Come closer," "Let me in," or, worst of all, "You're mine." And I would shout back at them, my voice hoarse, demanding answers, demanding release. But the only response was laughter, echoing through the pipes, the vents, the floorboards. A laughter that was both many voices and one, mocking, inhuman, until I broke down in tears, begging for mercy. And that was when the dreams began, if they were dreams at all. Because when I closed my eyes, I found myself standing in a version of my room that was wrong, impossibly wrong, the walls pulsing as though alive, the floor slick and warm under my bare feet, and in the corner where my dresser should have been, the shadow figure loomed, clearer now, its head twisted at an unnatural angle, its mouth a gaping void that stretched down its chest, and from that void the voices spilled, all those who had lived here before me, all those who had vanished, screaming, in agony, pleading for help, their hands reaching out from inside its body, as if trying to claw their way free. And each time I tried to run, the door would vanish, the window would seal shut, and I would wake in my real bed, drenched in sweat, only to find scratches down my arms and chest, as if I had been clawing myself in my sleep, or worse, as if something else had touched me, marked me, and every morning I swore I would leave. But every evening, something would draw me back into that bed, back into the cycle, until my sense of time collapsed, and I no longer knew what day it was, how long I had been trapped, or if I was even alive in the way I used to be, until finally, one night, the thing revealed its true intention. I was standing in the kitchen, heating a can of soup when the lights went out, plunging everything into blackness. And from the corner of the room, I heard it, breathing, wet, ragged. And when I lit a match with trembling hands, I saw it, fully formed at last, its body towering and skeletal, its arms too long, its fingers ending in sharp, cracked nails that scraped against the counter as it leaned closer. And though its face was still a void, I felt it smile, and in a voice that was both my own and something older than time, it whispered, "You opened the door before the match burned out, and the darkness swallowed me whole." And I don't know how long I was gone, if it was hours or days, But when I came to, I was lying on the floor of my room, my belongings destroyed. The walls covered in words carved deep into the plaster me name, over and over, scrawled hundreds of times as though written by invisible hands. And I knew then that I wasn't just being haunted, I was being claimed, turned into something else. Another voice for the chorus inside that shadow's body. And as I sit here now, writing these words, every light in the room flickering, every corner pulsing with movement, I can hear the footsteps again. Slow, deliberate, coming closer, and though part of me wants to run, to scream, to fight, I know it's too late. I know the warning my own voice gave me was true, and I ignored it. And now the air is so cold, my breath hangs in front of me like smoke. The smell of rot is choking, and the shadow is here, standing right beside me, its hand reaching out. And if anyone finds this, if anyone hears my story, no, this didn't come looking for me. Don't try to find room for, don't ignore the signs, because once it chooses you, once it whispers your name, you are already lost. And the next voice screaming inside its hollow body will be yours. And the next voice screaming inside its hollow body will be yours. And if you made it this far into my story, if you felt the chill creep into your own room as you listened, if the shadows around you seem just a little darker now, then I ask you to stay with me a little longer. Show your support by liking this video, so I know you were brave enough to endure it. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories that blur the line between the living and the dead. Share this with someone who thinks they don't believe, and leave a comment below telling me if you've ever felt something watching you in the dark. Because maybe, just maybe, you'll realize you're not as alone as you think.